because I am way too damn lazy to make an intro, I'm just going to cut to the chase. Today's movie review is Dracula, Prince of Darkness, the sequel to Horror of Dracula, released in the year 1966. The movie starts out as a recap of the last film. I'm not going to go too in depth with that. You can check my Horror of Dracula review for that one. The movie starts off a decade after the first, and we see a woman who is dead being carried to a nearby forest to be staked because the whole vampirism thing due to 1885. We even see her mother begging the men not to stake her. Just then, a guy named Father Sandor, played by Andrew Keir, arrives and berates the men for trying to stake her because the whole vampire thing being like 10 years ago and no one would really care since then. We then cut to the Kent family, which includes and is limited to Charles, played by Francis Matthews, his wife, Diana, played by Susan Farmer, his brother, Alan, played by Charles Tingwell, and his wife, Helen, played by Barbara Shelley, tour in Europe when Father Sandor comes in and warns him not to go to Carlsbad. Why? You'll find out soon. Against Sandor's advice, they arrive at, where else? Dracula's castle. Charles decides to go in, and the rest follow him, and the men go exploring, seeing if there's anyone there. When Clove, played by Philip Latham, instead of Patrick Troughton in Scars of Dracula, arrives, Helen screams the heck out. It's pretty funny. The family go eat dinner and go to their rooms. That night, Clove hauls a huge trunk through the room, and Al goes to investigate. Helen tries to convince him not to do so, and she was right to do so, because that would be the last time Helen would ever see her husband. How? As Ellen was investigating, Clove stabs him in the back, hangs him over a nearby crypt where Dracula's ashes are, and slits his throat. I hope you like long scenes, because this resurrection scene is almost 2 freaking minutes long. And at 47 minutes in, we finally see Dracula's hand peering out of the crypt. Clove then goes into Helen's room that night and lures her into the crypt. She's trapped there. She finds her now dead husband in a nearby chest, and she is absolutely horrified. But before she could process her emotions, Dracula appears and bites her, turning her into a vampire. A little while later, Helen encounters Diana and attempts to bite her before Dracula appears and harasses Diana. Just then, Charles comes back. Helen tries to bite Charles. He manages to push her away, but Dracula interferes and throws Charles near a fireplace. Just then, he manages to grab a nearby sword, but Dracula simply breaks it and continues to strangle Charles. Just then, Diana's cross necklace accidentally burns Helen. Dracula sees this, and Charles sees this opportunity to grab the pieces of the sword and put them together in the shape of the cross. This allows them a brief escape from the castle. Unfortunately, as the couple are escaping, they get into a carriage accident, which knocks Diana unconscious. Charles carries her quite a ways before they encounter Father Sandor, and he takes them back to his abbey. As Diana is recovering from her wounds, Sandor explains to Charles, like all the vampire stuff, like how vampires can be killed and, quote, how a vampire can be destroyed, but not killed. As Diana was recovering, she woke up and saw Helen outside her room in her window. She convinces Diana to let her in, and once she does, Helen bites down on the wrist before Dracula laughs, only for him to flee. Father Sandor then grabs a nearby oil lamp and cauterizes her vampire wound. Unfortunately for Helen, 2 of Sandor's men eventually catch her, and Sandor tells them to put her on a nearby table before Sandor eventually stakes Helen, freeing her soul. Meanwhile, in probably one of the most perverted scenes of the whole series, Dracula comes back for Diana, partially undresses his shirt, cuts his chest open, and then tries to make Diana drink his blood. Charles calls her name, forcing Dracula to flee, with Diana falling unconscious and accidentally breaking a glass door in the prison. Then Father Sandor and Charles go off on a journey to save Diana. After killing Clove partway through, they eventually arrive at Dracula's castle. 2 coffins, one containing Dracula and one containing Diana, was discovered. Diana was safe in the coach, while Dracula slipped onto a nearby moat. Charles tries to go and stake Dracula on the ice. However, nightfall has fallen, and Dracula rises from his coffin and savagely attacks Charles. Diana tries to shoot Dracula, but Father Sandor knows it will be pointless, so Diana shoots the ice, causing Dracula to go into panic. Father Sandor takes over and shoots the ice surrounding Dracula. Charles manages to flee, while Dracula sinks under the ice and dies. Until the next movie, of course, but we'll get into that later. Overall, story is great, characters are great. Pretty much everything I said about the last movie is great. Overall, I give this about the same rate I give the last film, a 9.5 out of 10.